Okay? Now, all of these terms and the terms that we're going to keep talking about, they all arise because of the fact that the institution of finance is quite old. And the issuing of bonds as a form of raising debt is also quite old, both for governments and for companies. And so this old time terminology exists, and it has just stuck. It just keeps going, even though we have sort of redefined the time value money formulas and the inputs to those formulas and things like that. And we could have tried to standardize all the terminology across all the different financial contracts so that they were all, every time they were referring to the same formula or the same input, they had the same name. We just haven't done that. Okay? Finance has kept its anachronisms for whatever reason. Okay? And these anachronisms come from the physical form of a bond. Okay? So this is a really old bond. This is a bond sold by the Republic of Texas. And it's sold by the Republic of Texas on February 5th, 1840. Okay? And you may not be able to read it. You have to pause and really zoom in because it's in that sort of old script. But it says, this bond is for the order of $500 is payable in order with interest at the rate of 10% per annum, payable semi-annually on the 15th days of June and December at the Treasury Department in gold or silver on presentation of this certificate and delivery of the several interest warrants in the margin here. The first payment of interest is the 15th day of December, 1840. Okay? And then you can see at the bottom that there's a series of squares. And they say a $500 certificate, number 154, and you can see that those numbers are on each one, and it says 10% consolidated and created. It gives the date. It says interest warrant. It's paid in the order of $25, which is 10% of 500 in gold or silver, and it lists the individual dates. So it says June 15th, then December 15th of 1843, then June and December of 1844, and so on and so forth. Okay. So this is a bond sold by the Republic, the state of Texas back when Texas was a country, and so they were raising their own money, and they were borrowing $500. Okay. Now here's where all the terminology comes from. You can see that the 500 is all over the face of this document. It is stamped straight onto the face of the bond, which is why it's called the face value. So this is the amount that's being borrowed, and it's the amount that must be repaid by the state of Texas when the bond matures. Okay? Now, here in the actual language of this document, they call these interest warrants, but most bonds call these coupons. Okay? And you can see why. I mean, this terminology, coupons, is when you think about it like clipping a coupon to go to a store or something, that's what this is actually coming from, right? So down at the bottom, you see those 10 squares. Those are the coupons of the bond, and they must be cut out and turned in order to collect the coupon payment, which is the interest that the state of Texas or the Republic of Texas is promising to pay. Okay? So you must cut these coupons off and turn them in order to collect the money. Okay? And the coupon rate is the rate that's written on the coupon that defines how much money you get paid in each coupon payment. Okay? Now here they're calling them warrants, but this is effectively the same thing, right? The terminology is typically coupon if you find some other bonds like this. Okay? So one of the interesting things about these is that because of the way the money is collected, meaning the coupons are cut, and then the way you collected your face value back was you turned in the upper part to get your payment back. Not many of these exist anymore because, of course, they had to be turned in for the money to be collected. So they essentially had to be ruined to get the money. And so the only bonds of this age that still exist are ones for failed states, failed companies, things like that don't exist anymore. So you can still find these for companies. They were still issued in physical form probably until the 70s or 80s. And so there are certainly lots of bonds outstanding. And I think the historical ones from the governments are kind of cool. But again, these are only existing for if they weren't collected for some reason, or if the state or the government collapsed. So there's lots of Confederate bonds floating around from the Confederacy. There's the Republic of Texas, because of course eventually Texas joined the Union and stopped being a republic, so they never paid on the debt like this. There are bonds from lots of failed companies. This one is really obvious with the coupons and the coupon rate and the amount stamped on the face. So I like to use it. It's not the only one though. One of the coolest ones I think is here. Here's this one. This is a living bond. So this is a perpetual bond. Okay. It is a bond that was issued in 1648 by the water district of Amsterdam, right, in the Netherlands. And I don't use this one because, of course, it's written in Old Dutch, so it's it's impossible for us to read, and certainly I can't read it here. It promised 5% in perpetuity, so it promised a coupon payment of 5% forever. That's what perpetuity means. So it's a perpetual bond, which is really, again, really rare. And it's one that's, because it's a perpetual bond, still being collected on nearly 400 years later. It's currently owned by the Yale Library, and they still go to Amsterdam every year to collect their payment. Now, because it was, they loaned, the loaned amount in 1640 was like $100. The payment that they get every year is like $128 because it has grown with interest, but they're not getting very much from this. But it is just such a cool artifact that it still exists, that it's still being paid. And you can see in the margins here, they have listed all of the coupon dates and the money that was paid for all of these coupon dates, which is to me is just a very cool thing to see that. Something this old was being issued. I mean, that the idea of distributed loans and of raising money by distributed loans was already ongoing in the mid 1600s in the Netherlands and other places, and that one of these bonds is still existing. I mean, when we talk about perpetuity in stocks and companies, and we say something could go on forever. Well, certainly, here's an example of something that has been going on and paying a steady rate for 400 years, and presumably will continue to do so until at least the Amsterdam Water Authority ceases to exist. So the terminology all comes from the history, and at least to me, the history is one of the cool parts about it. Okay, so let's talk some more common terminology in the bond world. There is some unique functions of bonds being that come about because bonds are contracts that I want to make you aware of, but that you won't really be required to. I'm certainly not going to test you on it, and we're not going to talk about how to value these more unique types of bonds. But because a bond is a contract, we can write any number of things into the contract that we want. So any number of rules or different regulations or things like that into the contract that we want. And these different rules are called covenants. So we can write any number of covenants into a bond, and they can change the sort of common structure of that bond in different ways. Now, one of the most common ways, and this is relatively common, probably 60-70% of bonds have this covenant in there. It's called a callable covenant. And a callable bond is a bond that can be retired prior to its maturity date. And what that means is that the company can choose to repay the bond early at any point in time. Okay? Now, this is a pretty standard covenant in any kind of loan. So if you get a house or a car loan, I would encourage you never to take one that has any what are called early prepayment penalties. So don't take any loan that will penalize you for trying to pay it off early. That being said, if you're the lender That's not necessarily what you want, because of course, if someone pays your loan off early, then you forego all of the additional interest payments that you should have received into the future, right? So it's while it has become commonplace, it's not necessarily good practice for the lender to have this kind of policy. Okay, so a callable bond is just that. It is the provision in a bond that makes it more like a standard commercial loan that allows the company to pay it off. And it's called a callable bond because, of course, when this kind of provision was introduced, that's literally what the company had to do. They had to call all of the bondholders and say, we want to pay the bond off early, and we're going to send you the money. And that's how that worked, right? So that's why it's called a callable bond. And the callable price is simply the price at which the bond must be called. Now, typically this is a premium relative to its price, and it's a premium because it accounts for the foregone coupon payments. So usually these covenants say that if the company wants to pay the bond off early, they do have to pay the present value of the remaining coupon payments. Okay, so that this is called what's called a make-whole provision. It's so that the investors get all their money back.